Welcome to Joydala Fashion Guide. Today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to make this layered skirt, layered gather skirt. Please ensure to watch the video to the end. So I'm going to be using pattern paper to show us two ways we can make the layered skirt, after which we will now cut with our fabric. The first method is the A-line method. Okay, I'm going to be using this pattern paper to show you how to do that. So assuming this is the fabric, we'll cut it out the way you cut out a skirt pattern. Okay, to know the amount of fabric to put on fold, use your hip allowance, quarter of the hip plus at least 6 inches extra. Okay, and then of course this is going to serve as a base for the layers. Then you want to mark the hip measurement on the waistline, because you are going to be having some gathers on the waistline. So on the waistline, you mark the hip circumference, quarter of the hip circumference. You mark it on the waistline, and then you mark from the waist to the hip. For some is 8, for some is 9, depending on your measurement. So whatever you have on the waistline, you repeat it on the hip line. Okay, you go ahead and mark what you have. So this paper is serving as a sample. So to have a straight line, I'm just going to mark waist to hip on the other side of the paper so that I can have a straight line. So the next thing, we go ahead and label our pattern. Before then, I'll use the marker to highlight the lines again so it will be visible. So this is the waistline. This is the waistline, and then this is the hip line. So once you have marked the hip and the waistline like this, the next thing is to add seam allowance. You add seam allowance to your measurement. You add your seam allowance, and then from the hip line, we are going to connect to the hem in a slanted form. So there are two ways you can do this. You mark the waist to the hip, and you connect the waist to the hip and then the hip to the hem. Or alternatively, you mark from the waist, you just slant it straight to the hem. Remember, this is an A-line shape. Okay, so alternatively, from the waist, you slant it to the hem. So whichever one you want to do, it is okay. Either you mark from the waist to the hip and then slant it towards the hem. So those are the two ways that you can achieve this. Or from the waistline, you slant it towards the hem. So whichever one you want to use is okay. So the next thing, we cut out our pattern. So remember, this is the front pattern. We place this on another pattern paper to cut out the back. We'll cut out the same thing. The only difference is that we'll be adding a zipper allowance. So once we have done that, we are going to determine where the layers will be. Okay, so you determine where the layers will start from, whether it's going to start from around the hip or we are going to shift downwards. So you just determine the intervals on the layers as well. So from the hip line, you can come down a little and then determine the spacing of the layers. So this is totally optional according to your preference. So you go ahead and mark it. So we are just assuming that this is our fabric, so you just mark it. You take your time, you mark it with the same interval. So I'm just using the marker to highlight again so that it can be clear. So these are first layer, second, third, fourth, fifth. And then you open it up, and then you extend the lines to the other side of the fabric. Then after that, remember it's going to have a back pattern, so you are going to rule on the back pattern as well. And also, if you want your lines to be slanted, you can also make it slanted. Okay, you can make it straight or you can slant it depending on how you want it. For the one I made, I slanted the lines. So assuming you are going to slant it, this is how it's going to be. From the hip, it will slant towards the down part. That is how you just continue ruling your lines. So we'll do same for the back pattern as well. So the second method is the 180-degree flare. So if you are using the second method to cut a layer skirt, you are going to fold your fabric. Assuming you are working with 3 yards of fabric, first you fold it into 2, and then you now fold it like a triangle. And then after folding, the next thing is to mark the radius. So the radius is going to be the waistline, the waist circumference that you are working with. Okay, if you want it to have some gathers, then you will not use your exact waist circumference, you will add some inches to it. And then you also mark the length of the flare. Okay, so I'm just using the first one as a sample to mark the length of flare. So you go ahead and mark the length of flare all the way around. Remember to add your folding allowance to it. After which you cut it out. So we are going to have something like this. Okay, so the middle is the front pattern, the center front, the folded side is the center front, while the other side, this part is I'm writing right now, is also part of the front, while the other side is the back. We have half of the back, then the center front, and then another half of the back. Okay, so this is what it will look like when you open it up. So this is the method I'm using for the skirt that I made. So you see the difference between the two. The first one is A-line, this is A-line, and then the second one is flare. Remember, this A-line, you are going to have 2 pieces, the front pattern and the back pattern. Okay, you are going to have 2, and then you are going to join it. But this half circle, the front and the back are already together, but this A-line, you have the front and the back, then you have to join it together. But for this is already joined, you already have the front and the back together. So once you have cut your half circle out, the next thing is to mark where the layers will be. Okay, if it's going to be around, start from the hip area or a little bit below the hip, you just decide, can be 12 inches from the waistline, and then you just mark it. The marking will guide you in sewing the ruffles on it. So you take your time to mark it, and then you can use the same spacing for the layers. Just use the same spacing all through. Okay, take your time. It will take you some time to mark on fabric. So you just mark it using your tailor's chalk. The pencil mark is faint, but I hope you understand what I am trying to explain. So mark at intervals. So you connect all the dots together. So I'm going to be using the marker so that it can be visible. So sorry, the marker is not showing so much, but I hope you can see what I'm trying to illustrate. So this is what it will look like after marking. Then you open it up and then extend the marks to the other side of the fabric. So you just use your tape to also check, to do this marking, the spacing, making sure that it's same with the other side, and then you connect the lines together because the line is a continuous line. So we have our layers. So once you have finished marking, the next thing is to measure what you have on each layer. You measure what you have on each layer to know the amount of ruffles to cut out. So you measure it and then you multiply by 2 or by 2.5 or by 1.5, depending on the amount of fabric that you have. So you measure, that's how you're going to measure each line. So this is the second layer. You measure it as well, and then you multiply by 2 or by 1.5, depending on the amount of fabric that you have. If you want it to be very full, then you can multiply by 2.5. When we are through with all the layers, you are going to fold the zipper line. Okay, the zipper line, will fold it and stitch it. Remember, we are still going to be adding our zipper. So once we are through with that, the next thing is to cut the waistband. So you just measure what you have on the waist. For this one, you can use your exact waist circumference. Okay, for the radius of, you use your exact waist circumference. Okay, except if you want it to have gathers, then you can use more than your waist circumference. But when you are going to cut out the band, you are going to use your exact waist circumference plus zipper allowance. Okay, so after marking the length, the next thing is to determine the height of the band, whether it's going to be 1.5 or 2 inches. But for the skirt that I made use of 3 inches. And then we are going to fold it into 2. So if you are using 3 inches, unfold, your paper will be 7 inches because we need 1/2 inch seam allowance to fold the edges. If you want your band height to be 2 inches, unfold, you are going to cut 5 inches because you need 1/2 inch seam allowance to fold the edge of the band. And if you want your band to be 1.5 inches in height, then you are going to fold 4 inches. So that is how you are going to do it, depending on the height of the band. Okay, so once you have cut out your fabric, it should match the waistline like this. Okay, so you use the seam allowance to fold in the side. You fold in the 2 sides, you close it, and then we have 1/2 inch folding allowance. You fold it before you fix it. So that will be all for the skirt. So we are not going to be cutting on our fabric. So this is our skirt. After cutting it out, you are using 1/2 circle. Then after that, you mark out where you are going to put the ruffles. So I'm going to have 5 steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So roll it out. These are the lines. So this is the back pattern. So this is the front pattern. So this is the front pattern, and then I've drawn lines on it as well. So I'll just open it up now for you to see the full skirt. Mind you, I'm marking it on the right side. So this is the complete skirt. So the down parts, we fold it twice. Yes. We use the complete skirt. I need to put the ruffles, sew the ruffles on the lines. Now, to know the amount of fabric to use as ruffles, you just measure what you have in the line from one end to the other, and then multiply by 1.5 depending on the amount of fabric I'm working. So I'm working with 6 yards of fabric, so I multiply by 1.5. So these are all our pieces that we're going to use for the ruffles. I've cut them out according to the different measurements. So before we start attaching or making our gathers, if you have any joining, you just stitch it. And then for the down part, we fold it twice. After that, we run gathers on the upper part and then pull it to the length of the main skirt. So we repeat that for all the pieces. So I'm going to arrange it on it now for you to see what it will look like after sewing. So when we want to sew from the down part, this one is for the 5th layer, you are going to turn it this way and sew, so that after stitching you now flip it this way, and then the seam will not show. Okay, it's only the 1st layer we are going to sew on the front side, but for the rest we are going to sew from the inside. So I'll just arrange them on it for you to see. So that is how I'm going to continue to arrange. So for one to sew, I'm going to start from the last line and then go till you get to the end. So for the 1st layer, like I said, after folding it down twice, the upper part we also fold it twice. Okay, and stitch it from one end to the other. Then we run our gather stitch on it. Then we place it on the skirt and sew from the top part, leaving like ½ inch on top, and so on, 0.75 and stitch. So once we are done with all, I'm going to take the band, the skirt is going to have a band, or iron gum stay on it, and then fold in the edge with ½ inch, fold it in with ½ inch, and then you're going to sew it on the waist of the skirt. So before we do that, we are going to join the skirt. It's going to have a zipper. So after sewing all the ruffles on it, just fold them into two like this. Measure where the zip is going to stop, and then from here down we sew. Then after that, that is when we now attach our band, and then our skirt is ready. So we'll show you the final look when we are done with all of this. This is Joydala fashion guide. So here's the final look of our layered circle skirts. This is Joydala fashion guide. It's 5 layers, half circle. I hope you find these tutorials helpful. Please don't forget to give me a thumbs up, like my videos, share my videos, and please subscribe to my channel. This is Joydala fashion guide.